Now, one of the keys to making a success of the antiques business, of course, is doing deals. And sometimes you've got to bend and sway and compromise to get a deal done. And do you remember this jug, the Cooper jug? You know, I took it to North Yorkshire, up Ripon there, to meet Alistair Sims, one of England's last master coopers. Well, the owners of the cooperage firm that Alistair works for, Jensen's Cooperage, is Jensen's Distillery here in London. And the owner of Jensen's Distillery is Christian Jensen. I hope that makes sense so far. Anyway, he called me after watching the video and said, David, I want to buy the jug. I'll give you 150 for it. Well, it owes me 150. I've got to make a margin. I said, I can't do it. He said, I'll tell you what, next time you're in London, come and see me, bring it with you. I'll give you 150 and £100 of another commodity. And I'll tell you some stuff that you didn't know about gin. So intrigued, here I am in London. I'm about to do a deal. Now, what do you think is the commodity he's going to give me? Well, I'll reveal in a minute. But in the meantime, let's go meet Christian and learn something about gin, stuff we didn't already know, and then we'll get the deal done. I don't even know whether this is legal. Anyway, let's go meet Christian. So come on then, Christian, tell me stuff I don't know about gin.
So gin started a long time ago in the UK. It started with the soldiers in Europe fighting along the Dutch and discovering Dutch courage.
So they'd have a shot of gin?
They'll have a shot of gin, or maybe more, to get the courage in the battles in Europe when the religious wars took place in the 1600s.
Yeah.
And when the English decided that they wanted to have a Protestant king, William of Orange, one of the things that he immediately did was to try to get money not being from the UK spent on alcohol from the Catholic countries.
Right.
And encouraged the English to make gin.
Yeah.
Or gin.
But didn't he basically say, look, make as much as you like, and he reduced the taxes? That was to kill the French brandy trade, I believe.
It was to kill the French brandy trade and some of the port and sherry trade as well from Southern Europe, because they were all seen as the enemies of the UK at the time.
But it worked.
It worked. And it caused a lot of problems in the UK quite soon after the gin craze in the early 1700s.
Well, you see, that's the story I know, and I've written about it in my book. And where we are here in Bermondsey, I mean, this was a real hot spot during the gin craze. People out here 200 or 300 years ago were dropping dead in the street drinking gin. But of course, it's very refined now, and here we are in your distillery, which is so refined. It's unbelievable. It's fabulous. How did you get into gin?
Well, the normal expression I use for that is carelessly letting one thing lead to another.
Carelessly? Oh, right. Okay, gin helps. And that rumble, by the way, is... What line is that?
That's the trains coming out of London Bridge into Kent.
Okay, there you go. London trains. This is proper London, under the Arches territory, isn't it?
The oldest railway arches in the UK are just a little bit further down from here. Actually, in London, 1836.
Right.
They got made around here.
It's a great location. But anyway, back to you. So you found yourself making gin, what, by accident?
Kind of by accident. It wasn't really planned. I've always liked a gin and tonic or a martini. And in Tokyo, when I was working out there in 2000, I ended up in a bar complaining about gin not being as good as it was when I was much younger in Denmark.
Oh, that's a sign of getting old.
Yeah. And the bartender, much to my surprise, agreed and fished out a bottle from the 60s and a bottle from the same company from 2000. And you could taste the difference. One was made in London, the other one was made somewhere out of London. And what has happened in the intervening period was that to make money, the big distillers had been buying up all of the small distilleries in the big cities and moved it out to cheaper places to produce.
Right.
And converting the old distilleries to housing or offices or buildings. So it had been much, much reduced, and I think in 2000 there must have been less than 10 gin companies or 10 gins available.
Well, that's unbelievable, because gin is the big fashion drink now, and there are hundreds of gin distillers around the country now.
It happens all the time, and in 2003, when I found out that I should try to make some gin for fun, I looked at who I could get to help me with that, because my background is finance, IT, and business transformation.
It's totally different to making gin in a place like this.
Yeah, so I studied engineering many years ago, and I thought, well, it should be possible to find somebody who can help me with this. And I found that in London there was 2 distilleries left that made gin. One was Beefeater, and the other one is a place down in Clapham called Thames Distillers. And I didn't really try to get Beefeater to make gin for me, but I called the other company up and talked to the master distiller down there. His family started making gin in the 1600s, so he's got lots and lots
good
of
heritage.
history. Good heritage.
So you had no experience, you were involved in finance and IT, but so it's a passion business.
Yes.
And now is it your full-time business?
It's one of my businesses that takes most of my time, and I have a few other businesses, but they're all in a similar vein. They're small businesses that I would like to grow to the right size and then keep them running at that right size.
But you've got a nice smile on your face, Christian. I think you enjoy what you do.
Well, that's kind of why I'm doing it this way. I could make more money elsewhere, but I wouldn't be nearly as happy doing it as I am here.
Well, there you go. That's something to learn, actually, because you can make more money doing other things. It's a bit like the antiques business. If you want to make stacks of money, you probably go into another business. You're in this business because you love it. And the more you love it, in actual fact, the more money you will make, because your passion comes through.
Yes,
I
but
can
it
see
also,
your passion.
money is not the only thing that I care about. I care about making good products. I care about doing the best thing I can do with gin and my other businesses as well, and creating jobs and being part of the community.
Oh, you're such a good person. You make me feel dreadful about my life.
No, it's not that. It's just, I mean, there are many ways of looking at value, and money is just one of them. There are other values out there, and I've had the luxury of having good income and saved some money, and now I can do things because of other values.
He's only saying that, by the way, because he's very good at negotiating, because the deal he's done on this jug, he's trying to make me believe that money's not important. I'll be giving him this in a minute. Now, but you said you were going to tell me stuff I don't know about gin. I know about the gin craze. Yep. Here we are in London. Is this a centre? Has it always been a centre of gin making? So
when William of Orange encouraged the English people to start making their own products, it happened everywhere in the UK, but London was particularly bad hit. Yeah. But all of the other big cities around the country, Plymouth, Liverpool, Bristol, were all big makers of gin during the 1700s. Yeah.
So what is it then about London gin? Is London gin different to other gin?
So London gin is a style of gin, the modern style of gin, that happened around 1830, when clean alcohol distillation was invented, or not invented, but made popular by improvements to a new way of distilling that happened in London.
So that's clean alcohol, meaning what? Does it taste different?
It basically has very little taste other than the alcohol, because you can make it really pure.
Okay, so London gin is a new invention from 1830.
Yes.
It just tastes better? Is it more refined then? Is that how you describe it?
So the difference was that prior to that, you basically used an unaged cognac or an unaged whiskey, something that had a lot of other flavors, but hadn't had the time in the barrel to really settle down and be an easy to drink, nice product.
Okay.
And if you want to make it fast to drink, either you can try to take all of the flavors out by filtering it, and make a vodka, or you can flavor it, which is what gin is. So gin is basically another distillation after you made the alcohol, to give it flavor, to make it drinkable. Okay,
but gin has changed, hasn't it? Because going back to the 18th century and the gin craze, it was probably 2 or 3 times stronger then than it is today, and people were drinking it by the pint and dropping dead in the street. And now it's all terribly posh. I mean, the ranges you produce are so sophisticated, it's not recognisable to the original gins from a few centuries ago.
No, I mean, the original gins were cheap and nasty. Gins, Mother's Ruin, and it was, I think, very much a working class product, because water wasn't safe to drink in the cities.
No, it was actually cheaper to buy gin than it would be to buy clean water.
Well, you couldn't get clean water, that was that simple. So people used to drink beer.
So what would you refer to gin pre-1830 and the London gin? Is it just gin or what?
So pre-1830, the gin was made with a less clean alcohol, and therefore they used a lot more botanicals. So
to flavour it up.
To flavour it up, to overpower, like basically to make it nice to drink.
Yeah.
So that style of gin is called Old Tom gin.
Old Tom? Where does that come from?
There's various stories about that. The most likely one is that there was a distillery in Lambeth that had 2 distillers called Tom. And young Tom went and started a gin palace near where British Museum is. And when he was buying gin that old Tom made.
Oh, right.
So that's where that name comes
so
from.
He was selling old Tom's gin?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And if you look at all of the drawings back from that period, from the gin palaces, they would all have barrels in the distilleries, or not in the gin palaces, because that is what they were buying from the distilleries.
Yeah.
And so the second part of the name of London Gin is London Dry, and that has nothing to do with it, like the distillery, because the sweetening of the gin happened when the gin palace owners wanted to make money.
Why?
So they diluted the gin, to make it more volume, so they could sell it.
Yeah. And make loads of money.
And make more money.
Yeah.
So they bought something and they made twice the volume out of it by putting water in.
Okay.
And to disguise that, they would use 3 things that are very well documented in many different sources.
Okay.
One of them is sugar. So sugar, when you add sugar to anything, it gives more flavor and it also gives sweetness, which is both things that people like. So.
Oh, I see. So if they water down the gin, then the flavour obviously in turn has been watered down, but adding the sugar brings to life the gin flavour.
Yes.
Which is one reason why we've got problems today with too much sugar in our diet, because manufacturers are putting sugar in to enhance the flavour.
It makes it easier to make more out of the flavour from the ingredients, so you don't need as many of the expensive ingredients.
Right.
They also used cayenne pepper to give it alcohol burn.
Alcohol burn? Well, that would give you a burn.
Yeah, so, and remember, these days you would think gin is a white, clear spirit, and therefore putting cayenne pepper in surely would colour it.
Yeah.
But gin at that time was stored and transported in barrels, like beer barrels, so no charring, no toasting, but barrels that were just neutral, but they would give it a slight straw colour.
Okay.
So if you see old adverts for Booth's Gin or some of the other gins that are using traditional ways of storing, they have a slight straw colour, so the cayenne pepper would not have been doing anything to that.
Just give it a good old kick. And what was the third ingredient?
The third ingredient they used was turpentine oil to give it a little bit of juniper flavour. the pineness. The American Distillers Institute did a big research project in the 1800s to find out why they couldn't make as good gin in America as they could in Europe. And the conclusion at the end of it is that they didn't have good enough turpentine. Oh,
there you go. I was going to say enhance your gin with a shot of turpentine, but I'm not going to say that.
No, we don't need that. We don't need that these days. Like, just don't dilute it too much.
What's your favourite flavour of gin that you make here?
So we do a lot of flavoured gins, as you're hinting. So I started making sloe gin and damson gin, but because I live close to the big market in London Borough Market, I started buying other things. We have a rhubarb gin, which is lovely. And it's unlike most of the other rhubarb gins out there because, again, I don't like putting sugar in things. So it's very tart, very rhubarby. And it's one of the things that surprises people when you taste it on its own. It's very closed and very concentrated, but it doesn't taste that rhubarby. So if you put it in a tonic or put some tonic in it or other liquid, it opens up the flavor and it actually tastes more of rhubarb when it's been diluted.
Right.
So most of the stuff that we do are so concentrated that they'll open up.
And you've got a bar here as well, I could see when we walked through.
Yeah, so the front of the arch is a bar and a shop, so we can sell bottles to take out. We can get people to come here for events and tours. So we do a lot of talking about gin here.
And is the Cooper jug going to be displayed in the bar area?
It's either going to be displayed in the bar area or go back to my collection of gin paraphernalia back in my flat.
Fantastic. Now, so we've agreed 150 plus. This is where you're going to be intrigued here. 100 quid's worth of stuff. Guess what it's going to be? What's it going to be?
It's clearly going to be gin.
It's got to be gin, hasn't it?
So we're definitely going to do the 2 kinds of gin.
Yeah.
But we're also going to find you some infusions that you like to complement that.
Well, I'll leave that entirely up to you. Christian, it's been a delight. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Look, there's the railway arch we were talking about earlier on. Right, I've got £150 worth of cash in my pocket and a box of Jensen's Gin, and he has just out-coloured me. Now, if this was a BBC production, he'd be edited out. I would have to do this scene again, but I kind of like it. Adds a bit of colour variety. So thank you to Christian. Thanks for watching. I'm David Harper. Till next time, goodbye.